Jerome Washington pushed his mop bucket down the empty hallway of the big research building. The wheels squeaked a little, but he didn't mind. 3 years working the night shift here, and he knew every sound this place made. At 42, Jerome had gotten used to the quiet. It gave him time to think about his daughter Kaya, who was staying with her mom across town this week. The basement was always freezing cold. Jerome pulled his jacket tighter as he walked down the concrete steps. His breath came out in little white puffs. The heating system down here had been broken for weeks, but nobody seemed to care about fixing it. Why would they? It was just the basement where they stored old equipment and forgotten experiments. Jerome was mopping near the old storage shelves when he heard something strange. A tiny sound like baby birds chirping, but weaker. Much weaker. He stopped mopping and listened. There it was again, coming from behind a stack of metal boxes. Jerome walked over and moved some of the boxes aside. What he found made his heart skip a beat. 3 little creatures were huddled together in a pile of old papers and lab coats. They looked like tiny dragons from a fairy tale, but real. Their scales should have been bright and shiny, but instead they looked dull and gray. Frost covered their small bodies. They were shivering so hard Jerome could see it. These had to be dragon babies. Jerome had seen pictures of them in the building's information books, but never in person. The dragon scientists who worked here had left suddenly 2 weeks ago when their home planet got mad at Earth about something. Guess they forgot to take everything with them. Jerome knelt down and gently touched one of the little dragons. Its skin was ice cold, colder than the concrete floor. The baby dragon barely moved when he touched it. The other 2 were just as bad. Their tiny chests moved up and down so fast and shallow that Jerome knew they were in serious trouble. "Oh no," Jerome whispered. "You poor little things." He looked around the empty basement. No dragon scientists. No fancy equipment running. No heat. Just 3 dying babies that somebody had left behind like trash. Jerome had found abandoned animals before, back when he was a kid growing up in Detroit. His grandmother always said you don't walk away from something that needs help, especially something small and helpless. She'd made him nurse injured birds back to health, feed stray cats, and once even helped deliver puppies when their dog had babies in a snowstorm. But these weren't puppies or kittens. These were dragon babies, and Jerome didn't know anything about taking care of dragons. He picked up one of them very carefully. It was so light, like holding a small bird. The little dragon made a soft sound, almost like a kitten mewing. Its tiny claws gripped his fingers weakly. Jerome felt something twist in his chest. This little one was fighting to live, just like Kaya had when she was born premature. Just like his baby girl had fought in that hospital for weeks while Jerome sat by her bed, afraid to hope she'd make it. "I can't just leave you here," Jerome said softly to the 3 little dragons. "I can't do that." He took off his work jacket and wrapped the 3 babies in it as gently as he could. They pressed against each other, seeking any bit of warmth they could find. Jerome could feel how cold they were even through the jacket. He carried them upstairs to the maintenance room where it was warmer. The building's main heat was on a timer that Jerome couldn't change, but at least it wasn't freezing up here. He set them down carefully on his desk and looked at them. They were beautiful, even half frozen as they were. One had red scales that looked like tiny rubies. Another had golden scales that caught the light. The smallest had scales that seemed to change from blue to green when the light hit them different ways. Jerome had no idea what dragon babies ate or how to take care of them. He'd have to figure it out fast because these little ones didn't have much time left. Their breathing was getting slower and weaker. He sat down at one of the computers the dragon scientists had left behind and started searching for information about dragon care. Most of it was in scientific language he barely understood, but he kept reading. These babies needed help, and Jerome was the only one here to give it. As he read, the 3 little dragons huddled together in his jacket, their tiny hearts beating fast against each other. Jerome glanced at them every few seconds, willing them to keep fighting. He was their only hope now. Jerome carried the 3 baby dragons upstairs to the maintenance room, his heart pounding with worry. Even wrapped in his thick work jacket, he could feel how cold their little bodies were. Their breathing had gotten so shallow he had to watch carefully just to see their tiny chests moving. The maintenance room was warmer, but not by much. Jerome tried turning up the building's heat, but the system was locked on some automatic timer he couldn't override. The little dragons needed warmth now, not in 6 hours when the morning shift arrived. He set them down gently on his desk and unwrapped his jacket. All 3 babies immediately tried to huddle closer together, their small bodies trembling. The red-scaled one made a weak chirping sound that broke Jerome's heart. They were dying right in front of him and he didn't know what to do. Jerome remembered when Kaya was a baby and got sick with pneumonia. The doctor had told him and his ex-wife that babies needed skin-to-skin contact to help regulate their body temperature. Sometimes the best medicine is just holding them close, the doctor had said. Jerome looked down at the 3 dying dragon babies. It was crazy, but maybe it could work. He unzipped his work shirt and very carefully picked up the smallest dragon, the one with blue-green scales. The little creature was so cold it felt like holding an ice cube. Jerome gently placed it against his bare chest, then picked up the golden-scaled one and did the same. Finally, he lifted the red-scaled baby and settled all 3 against his warm skin. The effect was immediate and amazing. All 3 dragon babies pressed closer to Jerome's chest, their tiny claws gripping his shirt. Their rapid, panic breathing started to slow down. The smallest one, who had barely been moving before, lifted its little head and looked up at Jerome with bright, intelligent eyes. "There you go," Jerome whispered, carefully zipping his shirt back up around them. "That's better, isn't it?" He could feel their tiny hearts beating against his chest, getting stronger by the minute. Their bodies were warming up and the trembling was stopping. Jerome had never felt anything like it. It was like holding 3 small miracles. But now what? Jerome couldn't just stand here all night holding them. He had work to do and he needed to figure out how to actually take care of baby dragons. He sat down at the computer, moving very slowly so he wouldn't disturb the babies sleeping against his chest. The dragon scientists had left behind tons of research files. Most of it was in complicated scientific language, but Jerome kept reading, searching for anything that could help. After an hour of reading, he found something that made his eyes widen. Dragon babies needed constant warmth for their first 3 months of life to develop properly. Without it, their internal fire organs would never work. They'd never be able to breathe fire or regulate their own body temperature. They'd basically be crippled for life. But there was more. The research showed that dragon babies bonded with their caregivers through physical contact and emotional connection. The dragon scientists had been studying this because their traditional way of raising babies, keeping them in heated chambers with minimal contact, led to a lot of deaths. Jerome found one research note that especially caught his attention. It said that human body temperature was almost exactly the same temperature that dragon babies needed to survive. The scientist had written, "Fascinating correlation. Humans may be naturally suited to dragon childcare in ways we never considered." As Jerome read, he felt the 3 babies shifting against his chest. The red-scaled one poked its head up near his collar and made a soft trilling sound. When Jerome looked down, the little dragon seemed to be trying to make eye contact with him. "Hey there, little guy," Jerome said softly. "You feeling better?" The dragon made another sound, almost like it was trying to talk. The other 2 babies stirred, and soon all 3 little heads were peeking out of Jerome's shirt, looking up at him with curious, bright eyes. Jerome felt something he hadn't felt since Kaya was born. That overwhelming protective instinct that made you want to do anything, sacrifice anything to keep a child safe. These weren't just alien creatures anymore. They were babies who needed him. He gave them names as he sat there, reading and learning about their care. The red-scaled one he called Blaze because of those ruby-colored scales. The golden one became Sunny for obvious reasons. The smallest, with the color-changing scales, he named River, because the blue-green reminded him of water flowing over stones. By morning, Jerome had a plan. It was crazy and probably against every rule in the book, but he was going to save these 3 babies. Even if it meant carrying them with him every day, keeping them warm against his chest while he worked. They trusted him now. He could see it in their eyes. And Jerome wasn't about to let them down. Over the next month, Jerome's life completely changed. Every day became about taking care of Blaze, Sunny, and River. He developed a careful routine that nobody else could know about. Jerome started coming to work 2 hours early and staying 3 hours late. He told his supervisor he was picking up extra cleaning duties to save money for Kaya's school clothes. It wasn't entirely a lie, he did need the money, but mostly he needed the time alone with his 3 baby dragons. He converted an old storage closet in the basement into a secret nursery. Jerome borrowed some heat lamps from the plant research department and set up a cozy space with soft towels and blankets. But the babies still needed him. They grew restless and cold whenever he wasn't nearby. The solution was simple, even if it looked crazy. Jerome kept at least 1 baby dragon against his chest at all times while he worked. He modified his work shirts, adding hidden pockets and extra space so the dragons could stay warm and hidden while he mopped floors and emptied trash cans. It became like a dance. While cleaning the 3rd floor offices, Jerome would have Sunny tucked against his chest. The little golden dragon would poke her head out occasionally to look around, then duck back under his shirt when she heard footsteps. River, the smallest, liked to sleep curled up near Jerome's shoulder. Blaze was the most curious and would often try to crawl up to see what Jerome was doing. The dragons grew incredibly fast. What the research said should take months was happening in weeks. Within 3 weeks, they doubled in size. Blaze was the first to produce a tiny puff of flame, no bigger than a cigarette lighter's flame, but Jerome felt so proud he nearly cried. Sunny followed 2 days later, and Little River managed his first flame a week after that. Their scales grew brighter and more beautiful every day. They started making different sounds, clicks and chirps and soft trilling noises that Jerome somehow began to understand. A quick trill meant they were happy. Rapid clicking meant they needed something. A low rumble meant they felt safe. But keeping them secret was getting harder. Destiny, who worked the day security shift, started noticing Jerome's longer hours. She was sharp and didn't miss much. One morning, she cornered Jerome as he was leaving. "Jerome, you've been here every morning when I arrive and still here when I leave for lunch," she said, crossing her arms. "That's like 14 hours a day. What's really going on?" Jerome's heart hammered. River was asleep in his shirt pocket, and he could feel the little dragon's warm weight against his ribs. "Just trying to save up some extra money, you know? Kaya needs new school supplies." Destiny raised an eyebrow. And why do you keep talking to yourself down in that basement? I hear you having whole conversations down there." Jerome felt his face get hot. He had been talking to the dragons constantly, explaining what he was doing, telling them about his day, even reading to them from the research files. "Sometimes I just think out loud while I work." "Right," Destiny said, but she was smiling now. "And I suppose that explains why you've been moving around so careful, like as if you're carrying something fragile?" Before Jerome could answer, River shifted in his pocket and made a tiny chirping sound. It was barely audible, but Destiny's eyes went wide. "Jerome Washington, please tell me you don't have some kind of animal living in your shirt." Jerome looked around to make sure they were alone, then sighed. "It's complicated, Destiny. Animals aren't allowed in this building, Jerome. You know that. I could lose my job if I don't report this." River poked his little blue-green head out of Jerome's pocket, looked directly at Destiny and made a soft trilling sound. Destiny's mouth fell open. Is that a baby dragon?" Jerome nodded slowly. 3 of them, actually. They were left behind when the dragon scientists evacuated. They were dying, Destiny. I couldn't just let them freeze to death. Destiny stared at River, who was now fully out of the pocket and perched on Jerome's shoulder. "My God, Jerome. Do you have any idea how much trouble you could get in? These are probably worth millions of dollars. They might be considered stolen property." "They're not property," Jerome said firmly. "They're kids. And they were abandoned." River climbed down Jerome's arm and made a curious chirping sound at Destiny. The little dragon's scales shimmered in the hallway lights, shifting from blue to green to purple. Destiny reached out hesitantly, and River sniffed her finger before gently touching it with his tiny nose. "Oh my," she whispered. "He's beautiful." "They trust me now," Jerome said quietly. "When I found them, they were half dead from cold. Now look at them. They're healthy and growing and happy. I can't give them up, Destiny. They're family." Destiny was quiet for a long moment, watching River explore her hand with gentle curiosity. Finally, she looked up at Jerome. "How long have you been doing this?" "A month. And nobody else knows?" "Just you." Destiny sighed deeply. "Jerome, this is the craziest thing I've ever heard. But..." She watched as River climbed back up to Jerome's shoulder and nuzzled his neck affectionately. "But I can see how much they love you. And how much you love them." Jerome felt relief wash over him. "So you won't report me?" "I should," Destiny said. "But I won't. On one condition: you let me help. These babies need proper care, and you can't do this alone forever." Jerome smiled for the first time in weeks. Maybe, just maybe, his little family was going to be okay. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in November. Jerome was in the basement with all 3 dragons when he heard voices upstairs speaking in the clicking, musical language of the dragon people. His blood went cold. The dragon scientists were back. Jerome quickly gathered Blaze, Sunny, and River into their hiding spot behind the storage shelves. All 3 dragons sensed his fear and pressed close to him, making worried chirping sounds. Blaze, now the size of a house cat, wrapped his tail around Jerome's wrist protectively. "Stay here and be quiet," Jerome whispered. "No matter what happens, stay hidden until I come back." River, the smallest but smartest of the 3, looked up at Jerome with those bright, intelligent eyes and made a soft trill that seemed to say, "I understand." Sunny nuzzled his hand, and Blaze gave a tiny rumble of agreement. Jerome went upstairs and tried to act normal, pushing his mop bucket down the hallway like any other day. But his hands were shaking, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the building's cool air. 3 tall dragon scientists stood in the main lobby, their scales gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Jerome recognized the lead scientist from pictures he'd seen, Dr. Veltar, an imposing female with dark green scales and piercing yellow eyes. She was speaking rapidly to building security in heavily accented English. "The specimens must be retrieved immediately," she was saying. "We have little time before they expire from exposure." Specimens. Jerome felt anger rise in his chest. These dragons saw Blaze, Sunny, and River as nothing more than failed experiments. Dr. Veltar noticed Jerome and walked over to him. Up close, she was even more intimidating, standing nearly 7 feet tall. "Human Janitor," she said in a voice like gravel. "You will assist us in locating 3 juvenile dragons that were left in this facility. They will be in the lower levels, likely deceased by now." "I haven't seen any dragons, ma'am," Jerome lied, trying to keep his voice steady. Dr. Veltar's eyes narrowed. These specimens were defective. Their thermal regulation did not develop properly. It would have been merciful if they had died quickly. Merciful? Jerome couldn't help himself. "They're just babies." "They are genetic failures," Dr. Veltar said coldly. "Their fire organs did not mature on schedule. In our society, such weakness cannot be permitted to survive. It would dilute the strength of our species." Jerome's hands clenched into fists. Every protective instinct he'd ever felt roared to life. "So you just left them here to freeze to death?" The natural conclusion to their existence, yes. Before Jerome could stop himself, he said, "What if they're not dead? What if someone found them and took care of them?" Dr. Veltar studied Jerome carefully. "Impossible. Dragon juveniles require specific environmental conditions to survive. No other species could provide adequate care. Now you will show us to the lower levels." Jerome had no choice. He led the 3 dragon scientists downstairs, his mind racing. Maybe if he got them away from the hiding spot, Blaze, Sunny, and River would stay safe. Maybe Destiny would find them and help them escape somehow. But as they reached the basement, Dr. Veltar stopped suddenly. She raised her head and sniffed the air, then made a sharp clicking sound to her companions. "Fresh scent markers," she announced. "The specimens are alive." Jerome's heart sank. Of course dragons could track by smell. How had he been so stupid? Dr. Veltar followed the scent trail directly to the storage area where Jerome had hidden his 3 children. "You will produce them now," she commanded Jerome. "Or face legal consequences for theft of dragon property." "They're not property," Jerome said firmly. "And I'm not producing anything." That's when Blaze appeared at the top of the basement stairs. The young dragon was now nearly 2 feet long, his red scales gleaming with health and strength. When he saw Dr. Veltar threatening Jerome, Blaze let out a growl that echoed through the basement. Small flames flickered around his nostrils. Dr. Veltar stared in shock. "Impossible. This specimen should have been dead within days of our departure." Sunny and River appeared beside Blaze, flanking him protectively. All 3 dragons positioned themselves between Jerome and the adult dragons, their scales bright with agitation. Jerome walked up the stairs and stood with his 3 children. "They're not specimens," he said quietly. "They're my kids. And they're not going anywhere with you." Dr. Veltar's companion, a tall male with blue scales, ran a handheld scanner over the 3 young dragons. His eyes widened as he read the results. "Veltar. Their development indices are extraordinary. All 3 show complete fire organ maturation and advanced neural development patterns." "How is this possible?" Dr. Veltar demanded. Jerome felt Blaze press against his leg, seeking comfort. Sunny climbed up onto his shoulder, and River wrapped his tail around Jerome's arm. Even facing down adult members of their own species, the 3 young dragons chose to stay with their human father. "Love," Jerome said simply. "Something you apparently don't understand." Dr. Veltar looked between Jerome and the 3 thriving dragons who refused to leave his side. For the first time since arriving, she seemed uncertain. "This requires further investigation," she said slowly. Jerome put his arms around his children, feeling their warm bodies against him. Whatever happened next, he wasn't giving them up without a fight. What happened next changed everything Jerome thought he knew about the dragon people and their society. Dr. Veltar called for a full investigation team. Within hours, the research building was filled with dragon scientists, human government officials, and legal experts from both species. Jerome sat in a conference room with Blaze, Sunny, and River pressed close to him, facing what felt like a courtroom of alien beings deciding his family's fate. The lead investigator was Dr. Zethran, an elderly dragon with silver scales who spoke better English than most of the others. He seemed different from Dr. Veltar, more curious than cold. For 3 days he interviewed Jerome and studied the 3 young dragons, running tests and taking measurements. "Tell me exactly what you did when you found them," Dr. Zethran said on the 3rd day, his voice gentler than the others. Jerome explained everything, finding them half frozen, bringing them to his chest for warmth, carrying them with him during work, talking to them, caring for them like he would any child. As he spoke, River climbed into his lap and Sunny perched on his shoulder, both dragons listening as if they understood every word. Dr. Zethran made notes on a strange device that projected holographic text into the air. "And their development has been consistent?" "Better than consistent," Jerome said, stroking River's scales. "They're healthy, smart and happy. They understand me when I talk to them. Blaze here can even say a few words in English now." As if summoned, Blaze looked up at Dr. Zethran and said in a small but clear voice, "Daddy Jerome good." Dr. Zethran's eyes widened. "Remarkable. Language acquisition at this stage should be impossible." Over the next week, more dragon experts arrived. They studied Jerome's makeshift nursery, analyzed the dragon's growth patterns and ran countless tests. But the most important test happened by accident. On the 5th day, Dr. Veltar decided to separate the young dragons from Jerome to see how they'd respond to traditional dragon care methods. The moment Jerome was let out of the room, all 3 dragons became distressed. They stopped eating, their scales dulled, and their body temperatures began to drop despite being in a perfectly heated environment. Within 6 hours, Sunny had stopped producing flames entirely. River wouldn't move from the corner where he'd last seen Jerome. Blaze kept calling out, "Daddy Jerome," over and over until his voice became hoarse. Dr. Zethran immediately brought Jerome back into the room. The change was instant and dramatic. All 3 dragons rushed to him, climbing onto his shoulders and into his arms. Their scales brightened, their temperatures normalized, and they began eating again within minutes. "Extraordinary," Dr. Zethran murmured, watching River nuzzle Jerome's neck affectionately. "I have never seen such a strong bonding response in our species." That evening, Dr. Zethran sat down with Jerome alone. "Your species approaches child rearing very differently than ours," he said thoughtfully. "We provide optimal environmental conditions, correct temperature, proper nutrition, adequate shelter. But we maintain emotional distance. We believe this made our young strong and independent." Jerome held Sunny in his lap while she slept, her golden scales catching the lamplight. "But kids need more than just food and shelter. They need to know they're loved." "Love?" Dr. Zethran repeated the word slowly. "This concept does not translate well into our language. We have duty, responsibility, genetic continuity. But love, this is new to us. It's not just about keeping them alive," Jerome explained. "It's about helping them become who they're supposed to be. These 3 aren't just surviving, they're thriving because they know someone cares about them as individuals." Dr. Zethran was quiet for a long time. "Our traditional methods result in a 60% mortality rate among hatchlings. Those who survive often struggle with social development and emotional regulation. But these 3. He gestured to where Blaze and River were playing a gentle wrestling game at Jerome's feet. "They show advanced development in every measurable category." 3 weeks later, the Dragon Council made a decision that shocked both species. Jerome Washington became the first human ever granted full parental rights under dragon law. Blaze, Sunny, and River were legally recognized as his children, with all the protections and privileges that status provided. But the real change was bigger than just one family. Jerome's success launched something called the Interspecies Childcare Program. Human volunteers began working with dragon families to help raise their young, combining human emotional nurturing with dragon knowledge and resources. In return, dragon medical technology was shared with humans to help children with genetic diseases and developmental problems. Kids like Jerome's daughter Kaya, who could now receive treatments that might save her life. 6 months later, Jerome stood in the new Interspecies Family Center, watching his 3 children play with other young dragons and human kids. Blaze had grown large enough to give short flights around the building. Sunny was learning to create different colored flames. River, still the smallest, was teaching English to newly arrived dragon hatchlings. Destiny had been promoted to head of security for the program, and she often joked that she should have known Jerome was hiding something important. "You know what the best part is?" Jerome said to Dr. Zethran as they watched the children play together. "What's that?" Jerome smiled as River flew over and landed on his shoulder, chattering excitedly about his day. I went from just cleaning up after people to helping build bridges between worlds. And it all started because I couldn't walk away from 3 babies who needed help. Dr. Zethran nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps the greatest strength any species can have is the ability to care for those who cannot care for themselves. As the sun set through the center's large windows, Jerome felt Blaze and Sunny join River on his shoulders. His dragon children were healthy, happy, and loved. And somewhere across the galaxy, other families were discovering what Jerome had learned, that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was simply holding someone close when they needed warmth.